Are joining. Thank you, everybody, for joining the HR Recruiting Roundtable. I'm PJ Trudeau, and I think I know everybody here, so certainly great to see all of you. Wanted to kind of start off, first of all, by thanking Staffing Advisors again. We can't tell you how much we appreciate your time, knowledge, the way that you guys are just so very happy to be able to answer questions for us, kind of let us know where things are. I know that a lot of us are struggling right now. We were talking about it at the roundtable yesterday, that some of us are seeing a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, being able to fill some roles, and that we are doing a little better with candidates. But we certainly appreciate all of your insights and thoughts on things that we could be doing differently, and would certainly like to start off with kind of what are you guys seeing right now? Is it getting any better? Are you seeing more candidates out there?
Man, I'd love to see light at the end of the tunnel. That would be awesome. Lily, maybe you want to share your most recent experience?
I get to be the cautionary whale for the week, Bob. Thanks. So fun story, I guess, depending on what side of it you land on. I had a requisition last week. It was pretty much closed up, sealed, offer letter had been signed. And, even before we got to that stage, I'd spent a lot of time talking to candidates through like counter offers and motivations and making sure it was really a good fit for both, not only my client, but also for the candidate. It's really what she wanted. Week after she signed the offer letter, sent me an email. Her current employer had continued to approach her after the third counter offer with a 40% roughly increase to current salary, least a couple 20, 30,000 over offer that I had in front of her. She decided that in good faith, she could not move forward with it. So lost that candidate again, week after signed offer letter. And it's a much more, I think, aggressive counter than I've typically ever seen. One, maybe two, really, but third and repetitive. And she's like, they just weren't going to stop. So, it was interesting. I think it's the first time I've ever seen something that's been quite that aggressive, especially with the prep work ahead of time. Like it wasn't necessarily a compensation thing originally, but I guess if you're going up 40% in salary, at some point, there's got to be a ceiling, right? So that is my cautionary tale for the week, that I think to adjust to current market and kind of all this transition with the great resignation, great reshuffle, whatever you want to call it, employers are getting more creative and more aggressive on keeping talented staff. Would be my way to start this fun call.
Was it a hard to fill position? I'm sorry.
It was a unique role. It was kind of a very different specialized pool. I would say smaller candidate pool than what we typically say. It wasn't like a Marcom role. It was in as a certifications position, which was a little bit unique in the medical field. So it was a smaller candidate pool to begin with.
I know that pool, but here's my question. Like, as an employee, like, forget the employer perspective, and there's a lot I would say on that, but as an employee, don't you sit there and wonder, all of a sudden now you value me? Where have you been the last X amount of years that I've been here, and have I been underpaid all of this time? Like, there's a lot of questions I would have as an employee. Well, and that would rub me the wrong way. I don't know. That's just, I mean, granted, nobody's turning down throwing money at you. Well, but just in the long term, like, is that person going to stay? There's so many bad feelings on both sides with that. I mean, I even had, candidates who said, oh, that's not enough money. And then I'm like, well, let's go see what I can do. And then they're like, well, if you didn't offer me that in the first place, why I'm not coming?
Absolutely.
So
I 100% agree. We generally don't ever encourage any kind of counter offer. Like, once you resign, you resign. Like, you should have the conversation before you're resigning. And have the space and opportunity. If you need more money, if you need something different from your role, give your current employer the opportunity to have that conversation. But cautionary tale.
and Lily, this candidate had actually talked to their boss before. Yeah, like before we even were talking with the candidate. They
talked to them. Yeah. They'd had a conversation before they even had begun the interview process. That's why they were open to looking, because they had significant tenure, like over a decade with current organizations. So you know, they had already kind of approached, had these conversations, been turned down, been told they were going to get something, didn't come through. And then when rubber hit the road, all of a sudden there's all these other things available, which to your point, Samantha, I think that's, it's a bad omen. I don't.
And Samantha, our internal conversation is in about 6 months, one of those two parties is going to make a different choice. The employer might say, we overspent or whatever, right? The employee might say, oh, I poisoned the well, they don't trust me anymore. I'm not invited to the, Christmas party, whatever it is, reindeer games. These things, once you make the break of, I'm considering leaving, maybe 1 person in 10 stays around longer than a year, but most people are gone within a year. From either side might make a different choice. As an employer, they might have been calculating, well, we'll keep this person in place by overpaying for X period of time, and that'll give us time to do the replacement. And I mean, you just don't know.
Well, not to mention the other conversations that are now going to be had with other employees, because someone is going to leak something to somebody. And now it's going to create all of this fuss, and everybody is going to want a raise, and everybody is going to be seeking counter offers. So there's going to be a domino effect. So I don't know what their plan is, but I hope they have one in place, because it sounds like they're going to really have to justify and have some level of transparency to the rest of the employees who are not going to be able to get this type of opportunity, right? And like you said, here, the expectations are most certainly going to be higher. I'm pretty sure they're not going to just give this money away. There's this side-eye conversation that's going to be going on, like, you better perform. So, but we all know it's more than that. Yeah, okay, yeah, I'm willing to perform, but now are you going to up my resources? Are you going to up my ability to collaborate with other people in the organization to make this worthwhile? I mean, it's not all on the employee, most certainly. And we shouldn't expect the employee to think about all of those things, right? So, yeah, I'm with you. I feel for that employee the most. And I hope that they have the wherewithal to make sure they're armed with all the things to have those conversations, because something is going to come up.
Truth always comes out.
Outside of salary, are you guys seeing other benefits that are making people leave? Or is salary the main driver?
So Aileen, I'm going to flip this to you. I mean, clearly the remote work is the thing. If you want to get a million more ad response, candidates, just put remote work, fully remote. Not entirely sure that fully remote is long-term having people buy in and stick around. The fully remote employees, like, how do you really integrate them into the team? How do you really have them feel bought in? The culture, I think there's going to be some longer term questions there. I'm seeing a lot of talk. This is probably more of a European thing, but I'm seeing a lot of talk in the I don't know, blogosphere or whatever about the 4-day work week, right? Man, my wife had a 4-day work week at one point, and she has missed the heck out of that ever since. So, I gotta wonder if that's the next, frontier in this thing. Not that we've seen a lot of that. And I want to be clear that we're bringing up Lily's example as an outlier. We're seeing aggressive counteroffers from employers. There's no way that 40% raises and 3 counteroffers becomes a trend. There's just, nobody can afford it, right? To Monica's point of, like, what do your other employees say, right? But Aileen, your thoughts about what you're seeing from candidates and what you're seeing is kind of highly valued.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and always, no one ever wants to really take a step back in salary. and so that hasn't changed. I haven't seen aggressive salaries, but I mean, if you're looking for a salary now, a higher salary now is definitely the time, because I think the candidates feel empowered to ask for more because they know. But I don't think well, I try to vet for that not being the driver, always looking at why you want the position, listen for growth, mission, etc. Leave, though, the time off is always a bone of contention. And, typically you lose, if you've been anywhere for any significant time, you're going to lose leave. But that's the one that's constantly negotiated, is leave. So if you don't have a robust leave program, that could hurt you.
I think where we are, for just our sense of it, and this is just like a best guess, because who could predict this job market or economy or whatever, but you're going to see candidates with multiple offers for a while to come, right? There's this talk of recession. There's this talk of Silicon Valley kind of retrenching. There's this talk of, certain fields, certain industries, if you will, are, having a different, it's not all good times in Silicon Valley at the moment, right? That kind of thing, right? Layoffs in the tech sector or whatever. It's always bumpy and uneven. It always hits different parts of the economy in different ways and different pools of candidates in different ways. So I think it's predictable that you're going to see lots of people with multiple offers for the kinds of people you're trying to recruit. At some point, if a recession takes hold, I hope it doesn't, but if it comes along, right, that's going to help temper some of this freelancing. I think we've described it, this newly found employee empowerment. Maybe that's a social good that employees can, feel more power in the negotiating. But it's a little bit like teenage drivers. Like, I first have this power for the first time and I'm not quite sure how to use it responsibly. And, if this is my only shot to negotiate, I have to beat inflation. I have to press hard for more salary, the one shot I get in the good job market, because 2 years from now it could be a recession and maybe this is my one shot. So I think we have some people who are not sure as candidates how to navigate this thing, but might be feeling like they get one bite of the apple, or they might have taken the bite of the apple 9 months ago and said, ooh, this job isn't really what I hoped it would be. Let me get another bite of the apple. Let me get what I can get before the economy turns again. Right?
Are you seeing people jumping jobs, and definitely not staying long term?
We're seeing really tenured people, like 10 years in a job, right? Consider a change, right? Take a change and say, oh, but that wasn't quite it, right? And then instead of like, oh, I should stay here for a year so my resume looks good, or stay here for 2 years so my resume looks good, they're saying, I'm gonna jump again, right? So the jump and jump again thing, we're seeing more and more resumes.
Or back.
What's that? Or back, or
back to their former employer.
And I was looking at research that Margaret had pulled down for a job, because Kim's out this week, so I don't always, she does that. But I would say every third or fourth candidate had only been in their job a few months. And then they weren't obviously looking, but I was just like, gosh, this whole candidate pool changed jobs in the last year. Like, it was pretty amazing. Like, I was like, everybody has changed jobs.
Well, the job that I left recently, I had a new supervisor, and that new supervisor got in last August, and she has already jumped ship as of last month.
Wow.
But, but there are lots of things with that. We had not really made, that job did not have the structure that it needed, right? Not enough thought had been put into what the job should look like now that we don't have the old person, and we have a lot of new things going on in the organization, and we really need to take a look at it and make it make sense. And I just don't think that they provided enough structure for her to really own the job. And her boss was really owning a lot of the functionality that came with it, and she just didn't feel like she had autonomy to make decisions as an HR director. So she was poached. And
Yeah,
she
I mean-
ran with it. And, and that to me is like as an HR professional, when our executive team is not really taking it in, we're telling them, listen, not only is it about recruiting, we have to now retain these folks. And this means getting guidance from you on what we can do to make this landscape look at least pleasant. And in this particular case, pleasant for the employees. So a lot of work needed to be done, and clearly she felt it.
Yeah, you make a great point. I do hear that a lot. Like, if you don't, this looks better, or it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, or I don't have the support, whatever. Like, people will now say, do I need to put up with this? No. And someone else is going to say, here's something just slightly better. And they'll talk to you. Because I mean, people all the time are just like, yeah, I'm not unhappy, but I could blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay. To Lily's point, that candidate went and asked her employer, like, can you do this, this, and this before she went on the market? And they said no. So I think there's probably some sort of listening to be done with, especially new hires. So.
Yeah, I would go on full alert when somebody casually inquires about what's possible for their career.
Yeah.
That could be the precursor to them saying, well, I will talk to Lily, who reached out to me about this job.
Yeah.
It's weird. There's almost no consequence to the candidate to jump again right now. 5 years from now, we might look back on that and say, that seems irresponsible. Right now, we're like, can they do the job? I have an opening.
Everybody needs to fill positions so badly at this point, and they'll do anything to keep the staff they have. But like everybody said, long term, how is that helping things, and how is that helping any of you? I've been asking a lot of questions. Do others have questions that they'd like to ask the group?
There's some here in the chat about the 4-day work week. So we have a client who does have a 4-day work week. I don't know if they work the 10 hours, but how they have it structured is you can work 5 days a week and 2 days in the office. If you are willing to come in 3 days a week, you can work a 4-day work week. So they've kind of structured it to incentivize coming in. So, yeah.
So you're saying that if they do the 3 days, they don't have to do 10 hours, they can just do 8 hours?
I'm not sure. I'm going to have to dig into that with them, because now I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, because for me, 10 hours, that's just too much. I don't care if it's remote or in person, but especially remote, 10 hours glued to the screen, that is very unattractive to me.
Well, and you have to be diligent about not working that day that you're off, right? Like, if you're a nurse, a lot of times you do 4/12s or something like that and you're done, but you're not there with, this type of job you can work 5 days a week. You can work 7 days a week. You have your computer all the time. So.
Yeah, but if I'm wiped out on day 5,
no, I agree.
It's not even worth it. I mean, I'm not going to get up until 12 or 1 o'clock because of working 10 hours the previous 4. That to me isn't worth it.
So I'm sorry, my camera's not working, but this 4-day work week concept is interesting because I feel like it's, on one end, we already have a lot of staff who are already doing that, right? When they talk about how much time they're putting in to do work. So in a way, it could be a reward them, right? Like, they're like, oh, I got this, I get this day off. But then on the other end, it almost promotes the burnout again. So it's like, it's a toss up. It's like, it could be a great benefit, but then on the other end, it could still further promote this whole concept of, burnout or, things of that nature. So it's really tough, because I agree with Azra. Sometimes I'm working a 10-day, a 10-hour day. And I look up and I'm like, oh, wow, how long have I been online? So, sometimes during the week, I may have 4 days out of that week that I'm working 10 hours. So I would love to have that day off. But then there's others who probably say no. So I'd be really interested to see how this trend kind of continues, if this is something we'll see a lot of organizations consider, and is it really an incentive for employees?
It only works if everybody else is off.
Right.
So Tisha, if you work a 10-hour day, right, and most of us probably work beyond the 8 hours, let's
Mhm.
face it. So if now your day is 10 hours, and this is just a question, does this mean now my 10-hour day is going to be 11 or 12?
Right.
That's true. I mean, and that's the part where, I mean, we already have these conversations about setting boundaries. So I feel like if you're already having conversations about setting boundaries, you would have to have a more in-depth conversation about setting boundaries if you're going to implement kind of this 4-day work week and have a lot of structure in that plan. Like it has to be a solid plan that you have in place in order to move something like this forward, because it could be so many type of so many questions, right? What ifs around this whole, benefit. So yeah.
I have a different. Oh, go ahead,
I'm sorry.
Bob.
Let me just throw in 2 quick observations and building on what you said, Samantha, is like, if everybody else isn't off, are you really off, or are you just getting like, interruptions on your day off? So we have one client who went to what they called focused Fridays, right? They tried not to have meetings on Fridays because a lot of what the work they did was like writing and proposals and thinking that, the interruptions didn't help. So focused Fridays either enabled people to more easily take a day off where other people weren't going to bother them, right? Or actually think and do writing and the kinds of things that they did. One of the things we've tried to do as a company, I'll just go ahead and call it out because, we've been doing it secretly for a little while. But anytime there's a 3-day weekend, we try to not block any meetings on the Friday before. So our team has that capability to, we encourage take every 3-day weekend and turn it into a 4. And we've noticed that very few of our clients are calling on, the Friday before Juneteenth. Aileen actually worked. And I was like, what are you doing working, right? And she said, it was really productive because nobody contacted me. I can get a bunch of deliverables done, right? So anyway, that might be a half a step toward the, make that Friday before, certainly before a 3-day weekend. So many people take those days off. Just a thought. So I'm sorry, Samantha, I interrupted you.
Well, I have a separate question outside of the 4-day work week. Are you seeing and I don't know if this will become a trend, and I read something, I want to say was on LinkedIn, I don't know where the article was from, that people have had positions open for so long that they are questioning whether they really need the role because they functioned for whatever amount of time. And so that may also be leading to organizations no longer hiring for opportunities. Are you guys seeing that at any point, or are others seeing that?
I could tie that a little bit back to something Monica was saying earlier, which is, look, there's a way we did things up through 2019, right? And then there's the new thing that we do now, right? And people who used to travel a lot might travel less. And some of the structures you had that made sense when everybody was in the office all the time, when you go to remote, some of those things, you decouple certain things, right? So we have seen organizations for a lot of reasons, for a lot of roles, say, yeah, we used to do things this way, but I'm not sure we want to do that. So Samantha, it might be, if it's been open for a while, you say, do I really need that? Right. But it's also, is that really how our, members want to interact with us at the association, or is there a different thing? And I know Brooke on our team has been looking at a lot of process automation things. And, I've talked to a chief information officer recently who kind of just methodically was going through the organization bit by bit and automating this piece and automating that piece. And we used to do this in this certain way. And, Microsoft has all these tools now to automate certain processes, and say, is that really a job anymore? Or is that can the machine do it? So the robots are coming for our jobs moment of freak out for today's call.
I think people are more rethinking through jobs. That's what I've seen. Like, I'm having a lot of conversations with clients like, okay, we've got to change something or think about this differently. And maybe it's a title, maybe it's salary, maybe it's how the work gets done. They don't want to lose that money in the budget. So they're like, but what can I do with it? You know, if I can't pay for an attorney, can I get maybe someone who does policy, but not, so those sort of things. So I'm seeing that a lot. Someone came back from a conference and said, oh, I need to rethink this job. It's been empty. I did the job. Now I need to rethink what I actually need. And then, or I found more money in the budget. I'm going to escalate this job. We've actually had several clients who, sort of beefed up the job, rather just because they were like, I think we need a little bit more. And so they find the salary and et cetera. But that's what I'm seeing, not necessarily going away, just kind of a iteration of it. Particularly if it's a new position or been vacant for a while.
I do think you do see more of, Sam, a lot of times, especially, I don't want to say this is just an association thing, but they decide that, oh no, we're not going to fill this position, but they don't take the work away. So the people that are left are still doing all of that extra work.
Yeah.
And then we're dealing with burnout because we've got people that are like, look, we cannot continue at this pace, and we've never actually stopped doing anything, which is probably companies in general, I think, do that. But certainly when you're trying to run on a leaner budget, which is definitely, that's certainly a concern. Other questions people have? Anything else you guys might want to ask?
Christopher put an interesting thing in the chat here about hybrid schedules, additional flexibility. I think that's a really worthwhile thing to explore potentially as the group. We worked really hard from the start of our company to have time in everybody's schedule, like prearranged, like huddle times to get together, and there's just predictable things that come up that we're going to need to chat about. So we try to block out some of those times, and we try to be really careful that people put personal stuff on the calendar first before we let the day fill in with other stuff. And so that personal flexibility that maybe you work 8 to 10, and then you're not working 10 to 12, and then you're that the personal stuff is equally important to the business stuff. And I'm curious how you all are working through that flexible scheduling question, because what people mean by the word flexibility is really variable.
Well, and Bob, your team's been remote from the beginning, like
Always.
long before COVID. You guys have been 100% remote. So you've been able to do that collaboration and, like you said, build in all the things that everybody's trying to make work now, which you keep reading articles that hybrid isn't really going to work as well as we'd like it to. Are we doing that? Do you guys meet in person at all?
Almost never.
That's every 4 or 5 years.
When we do meet in person, there's never an agenda because we don't need to meet in person to do anything. The hard decisions are always in a virtual setting.
And your tenure.
It's funny you say that.
I was just going to ask, how long and as long as I've known you, I've known you guys for years. Aileen has been, you guys have employees that have been there forever. So it's not as though just because you didn't meet in person or you're not having those meetings that it's, that people are missing something, which I know is a big concern culturally.
So Jen, you worked here, what, 2 years before I even met you? Was that right? Jen, you're on mute.
Technical difficulties. Yes, I worked for 2 years before I actually met Bob in person.
And then I begged her not to quit for 6 months because, how embarrassing would that be? Right?
And that was, I believe, almost 12 years ago. That was a long time ago. So, yeah.
So she survived the meeting with me. Thank heaven.
I did.
Okay, so tell us from an HR perspective to help us better do what we're doing better. What are you guys doing that is keeping everybody so happy and making them want to stay there for that length of time? Can I
chime in on that a little bit? I mean, from my perspective, from an employee perspective, I feel like everybody took the time to get to know me. And I know that might sound cliche or silly, but it wasn't just like a quick note in a chat. We weren't even using Teams back then. I guess maybe it was phone, email, but And I did, I did train extensively at first. So I felt like, and I did train in person with Aileen. So I guess that was it. But it's, it's also little things like just I feel like everyone knows what's going on with other people. So there is the personal touch. There's the flexibility. I feel like if I say I'm busy, somebody else is there that will help pick up the workload, and vice versa. If I'm not busy, I feel like I can be relied. And I think everyone, that everyone is going to get their work done. You really not, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure how else to describe it other than you're responsible for what you own. And I mean, no one's perfect. Somebody's going to make a mistake at some point. You own that too and move on and figure out how to fix it and not have it happen again. So I think it's just the flexibility and the communication.
So I'm going to jump into, because I'm the new kid on the block, right? All of, I don't know, a year, not even 7 months, 8 months, whatever it is. And I honestly, so I was government before and had only been remote during pandemic. And a lot of my concern in shifting into a fully remote position was kind of exactly what we've talked about. How do you onboard and make sure everyone feels connected and you understand, the hardest part when you start a job is who do you ask for what, so you can kind of orient yourself to how to do your job the way it's supposed to be done, right? And what I really appreciate about this team in particular is, to Jen's point, yes, everyone kind of did their own thing to get to know me, like set up a quick virtual coffee chat or kind of walk through, but the onboarding process was really helpful in that we sat down and had dedicated time to like understand the systems and the structures and where to find things and how to find them in a virtual setting, and making sure like the tech was in place the way that it needed to be, so that when I started, I had everything that I needed. The logins worked. There was someone that I could reach out to no matter what. They gave me like, our IT help desk people that can make sure that everything does what it needs to do, so that I felt well supported. And then the flip side of that, to what Jen was saying, is the trust that's kind of already built in within the team. So being given the space to ask questions and being given the space to mess something up without fear of any kind of retribution or retaliation on it. Like, you can ask what you need to ask, and everyone's available to chat via Teams if it's instant, or if you want to do a quick phone call, you can do that too. So just having those multiple lines of communication open, and the space to have time off when you need it without having to explain yourself. Like if you need a mental day, or if you need, a 4-day weekend, whatever it may be, you're given the space to arrange your work in a way that makes sense for you, but still working within kind of a team collaboration. So part of it could be because we're smaller, it's a little bit easier than a really big organization. But it was interesting coming from, massive, complex, bureaucratic government into a very agile, smaller space that had been adapted to this for a longer time and really had the structures in place to make you feel that you were onboarded well. That onboarding piece, I think, is really important, particularly now with people jumping after 6 months. Like, how do you really know what you're doing after 6 months? But if you have a good onboarding plan in place and people know that they know where to go to ask the questions, I think goes a really long way for the retention piece of things.
It's interesting to hear you say that, Lily, because when we were setting up your plan, it felt like a stupid amount of time to like do your password manager and set up your 2-factor authentication. And then looking at the schedule, I'm like, this is not going to take 3 days, but it does. It just takes like a stupid amount of time to get that stuff set up at the front end. And then once it's in place, everything else is easier from there. So it's funny to hear you say that.
Well, also from an onboarding perspective, the company that I just came to, I had 3 interviews, and the last one was a lunch with the team that I would be working with. And they were kind of giving me scenarios about different things that they worked on. And it also provided me an opportunity to, I guess, I gave them some warnings about how I operate too, because there's some, I can be a bit of a realist, and I find that can be a turnoff for a lot of people who don't like to be real. And I'm like, look, these are real things that affect people. And I just don't like to look beyond those things. And I think that we need to hash through these things. And I can be, for a person who doesn't want to handle it that way, it makes me look like I'm beating a dead horse. But I'm like, no, you have got to look at these things. These are real. And I told them, this is who I am. And I need you to understand that, because you're saying that you want me to come into this organization, but I want you to have a full picture of who I am as a person. And you need to make a real choice about whether or not you want me on this team, because that's not going away. I've tried it and it just doesn't go away. So they listened, and that actually made them, I think, like the whole package even more. And what they've done since I've been there, we kind of have these scripts on how we want things to play out. So for instance, I'm the person who brings the truth, and I would confront the person who doesn't necessarily want the truth or want the change that needs to happen. So as part of change management, I'm the one who will present it. And then my boss would be like, oh, they'll go to my boss and say, well, Monica said this and we don't like this. And she said, what she'll do is say, okay, well, we'll talk to Monica and see. And we'll just kind of work it that way, good cop, bad cop, and probably do something just kind of passive aggressive. Saying all that to say, we're using my personality to develop a strategy to change things in an organization that folks don't want to see changed. So
I love the personal branding. Monica brings the truth. I love that.
So that they're utilizing it, and they're, I'm feeling valued. And trust me, I think we're all being poached at this moment. And it's like, I'm like, it's like dating. Like, listen, I'm in a good situation. I'm in this great relationship. I do not want your phone number. We cannot talk, because I like where I am. And I have seen the support play out in a number of ways already. So that makes a big difference. So I can appreciate everything that you just said, because that is exactly what is happening over where I am. So we got to pay attention to that.
That is the most brilliant onboarding thing I think I've ever heard.
It was great. I really felt so valued, even in the interview. And it really took some courage on my part. Like, I was like, should I say this? But I just said it, and I wasn't sure it was the right thing, but it worked. And I get to keep being me. So
that's even better.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways you bring up a good point. So I think as you're hiring candidates and you're going through the recruiting process, keeping them updated. I talk to candidates all the time who have multiple offers and like, well, I think I might be getting an offer. I haven't heard back. I'm in a third round. And they'll say to me, I think I'm going to go with this offer because I feel like they're interested, and I'll tell clients, hey, get an offer out. Like, we got to get this, we got to get something in front of them before somebody else does. And I give updates all the time. Hey, I don't have an update for you, but I just want to let you know that, I hope to know something next week. And I call it I think I've talked about this before, my no update, just to like keep them engaged. And so often candidates will say to me, I'm in the process somewhere else, but I have no information. I don't know when I'll hear back. And it's just, sometimes I call, sometimes I email, I try to switch it up. Always keeping candidates warm just in case the first candidate doesn't work out, and I'll just send them notes like, hey, I'll have an update this day. They just want to hear from you. They appreciate that. And then once you hire them, kind of, hey, looking forward to seeing you next week, or, just some sort of engagement as you go along. I think is super important, because like to Monica's point, you have to feel the love, or they just might make a different choice.
Are you finding different places to recruit candidates from, or where are you finding the best places right now to get candidates from? I know you guys do a lot of sourcing, and is that the best way, or?
Let me, Margaret, I'll pass that one to you in just 1 minute, right? But Brooke put something in the chat. Maybe Brooke, you could Monica had a much more interesting example than what we're about to share here, but I just want to clarify what Brooke put in the chat because I asked her to do that. And then Monica had a much better example. But anyway, we'll be second fiddle to Monica here, and then Margaret, if you could pick up PJ's question after that.
Yeah, so I shared a file, a PDF in the chat that our partners at Brighter Strategies developed for us. So we were hearing from clients that they needed some additional support for onboarding. And so we reached out for a consultant that could kind of help give best practices for onboarding. And so one of the things that we are piloting right now, frankly, is working with Brighter Strategies to help advise clients. So they put together this, it's an 8-pager, but it has some like best practices, and then it has kind of a survey that you can assess your own practices that might spur your thinking on some things you might be able to do in the onboarding process to kind of get employees engaged. And then for our clients, as part of our agreement, we're offering that they can have a conversation to get more into the details, and Brighter Strategies will dive into kind of like your onboarding plan and give you some suggestions that are really catered to your organization. But this document might give some helpful tips for any organization.
Great, thank you so much. We certainly appreciate you guys sharing that.
Not our work, it's all Liz Scott, but all right, Margaret, back to, I've given you enough time to think about PJ's question. Go for it.
I don't know if there's ever enough time. I'd say I'm still sourcing from the same places, but I need more. I need to run the numbers up, and also need to be maybe a little more creative. Like once I've done all the easy pulls, now I've got to think about different ways to look at it, different, ways to think about it, different keywords, maybe, dive in more like on conference speakers, or just kind of broaden. But I'm still mainly using my same tools, just kind of expanding the effort.
And then for advertising, Brooke and Jen, what's working?
I was just going to say, for advertising, we've had a lot of luck lately with LinkedIn. We've put more money into sponsoring advertisements on there. And I know they've changed their pricing structure there. So instead of like per post or job slots, now you can allocate a different budget to specific positions. So they're changing that up. So we're still kind of experimenting with what the right mix is of that, but we've had some good luck there. And then Jen, I know you've been running numbers on how helpful ASAE is for association clients, and I don't know if you have any other feedback.
Yeah, I don't have any definite numbers I could share. It's always a consistent pull from ASAE. It's never a high number, but I feel like the quality of applicants is good. Having said that, what I'm really looking into now is whether or not some of those applicants have also applied twice, once through LinkedIn and once through ASAE. Because we do often get people who will apply twice under 2 different platforms for the same position.
And Brooke, we're still dumping money into Indeed, I think, right?
We are, yeah. I haven't run the numbers lately to see how that is. That's always performed well for us. But sometimes it's hard to tell, to Jen's point, because our applicant tracking system has partnerships with like 12 other sites, so Google for Jobs, as well as all like Glassdoor and all the smaller job boards. And so sometimes it's hard to tell where they find us. Mm-hmm. So it's always kind of we have to kind of do a little bit of a guessing game. We do the best we can to run some data, but sometimes we just kind of spread our wings wide and see what catches.
I take comfort in David Ogilvy, the founder of Ogilvy and Mather, said, I know half of my advertising budget is wasted. I just don't know which half. And I think that's been true for 30 years, right?
Right.
LinkedIn by far though is where most of our posting applicants come from.
I think that's what we consistently hear when we've talked about it on the roundtable. LinkedIn seems to absolutely be the best tool, at least right now. That and Indeed seem to be.
Yeah, that has not always been true for us, but this year it seems to be.
Yeah, and I think LinkedIn will reach out to you because I'm on there looking at like maybe a posting we have, and then it'll be like, hey, we have some accounting positions, and I'm like, well, you really don't want to be talking to me about that, but okay. So
I keep getting emails after looking up Samantha's position. I keep getting emails for a director of corporate relations, and you might be well suited for this. I'm like, that wasn't for myself.
Anyone have any other questions that you want to ask staffing advisors while we have them here?
Yeah, and I think just what we've talked about this before, but just having the generic titles out there too with LinkedIn, and that's why they work better because they're easily identifiable to the algorithms and to the person. So just a quick reminder on that.
We don't have any other questions. Thank you guys again so much for just kind of talking through so much of this. I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. And I know as we've done the recording, I know there'll be a lot of people that'll be looking into it after the fact who weren't able to join us today. But thank you so much for taking the time to do this. We certainly do appreciate it and wish everybody the best of luck in trying to get their positions filled.
Okay.
Be with you
It's
guys.
been fun. Thanks
Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye.